I didn't always believe in Jesus. For a while, I didn't believe in Jesus because I thought that believing in him meant condemning everybody else. And then for a while, I thought that believing in him was the same as believing in everyone else. It turns out that I was wrong on both accounts. It turns out that following Jesus is not like following anybody else. And yet, it turns out that following Jesus does not mean condemning everybody else. We're here at the Franciscan Monastery of St. Clare, and I'm so excited to share this place with you because in many ways, this place represents both the beginning and the end of my journey to Jesus Christ. If you look behind the altar, you can see God's created world, which for me was always a bedrock in my relationship with God. No matter where I was in my understanding of God, I could always sense the presence of God through his created world. And for a long time, when I was confused about Jesus Christ and about what I believed about God, I knew that I could always go into the presence of God just by sitting with him quietly in his creation. And so it's beautiful to me here at this monastery to be able to see God's creation right behind the altar. And it's on that altar that God gives us his Son, Jesus Christ, in the bread and the wine of the Eucharist, in the real presence of the Eucharist. And so this altar and what's behind the altar represents kind of where I was in my relationship with God and then kind of where it took me. For a long time, I couldn't trust the New Testament scriptures. I wasn't sure if I believed in miracles. I wasn't sure if I believed in Jesus. Frankly, I think I struggled in my beliefs about Jesus because I wasn't struggling with Jesus himself. I was struggling with the ideas about Jesus that other people had kind of given me. It turns out that many of those ideas were wrong and unbiblical and un-Catholic. It was years later, after hearing some of these ideas, that I actually went back and read the New Testament myself and sought Jesus Christ in a personal relationship with God myself. But I wasn't ready to do that at the very beginning. And so for a time, I just sat with God in his created world and listened. And believe it or not, it was many of the other faiths of the world that became safe harbors for me in my personal relationship with God. You see, there's one thing you have to know about me. God didn't lead me away from the other world religions into a relationship with Jesus Christ. God led me through the other world religions into a relationship with Jesus Christ. For a long time, the only scriptures that I could really trust and hold on to and that could lead me to God were the Tao Te Ching, which were written by Lao-tzu, a historical person who lived about 500 BC. Lao-tzu had this experience of God. He said that there was this thing called the Tao, and he could see that everything in the created world came from it, and everything in the created world would return to it. And then if you wanted to live at peace within this created world, you needed to live at peace and in harmony with this thing called the Tao. He said, in fact, that this thing, this presence, this creator presence, he said he didn't even know what to call it. So he called it the Tao, which means the way. And he wrote a book called the Tao Te Ching. There are no miracles in the book. Lao-tzu doesn't have any visions. He just senses the presence of God in the created world, and he realizes that being in that presence of God and being in harmony with it was the only way to have peace in this world. He didn't have any real answers about what happens after you die. He didn't have any visions of Jesus Christ or visions of God at 500 BC, but he knew that God existed, and he knew that being in harmony with God was the only way to have peace. And that's exactly what St. Paul says that God does through his created world in Romans chapter 1. In Romans chapter 1, St. Paul explains that God's presence, his invisible qualities, and his eternal nature are evident by his creation, so that we can draw into the beginning of a relationship with God through his created world. And that's exactly what Lao-tzu did. He began to be drawn into this relationship with God, who he didn't even know how to name, and so he just gave God the name Tao. He said everything came from him, everything goes to him, and following him is the only way to live. Lao-tzu wrote, "The Tao is the wonder of all of creation. It is a treasure for all who are kind. Those who have gone astray, the all-forgiving Tao will not abandon them. Those who have offended the Tao will be forgiven. I do not know its name, and so I call it the Tao. Lao-tzu realized that he was separate from God. Lao-tzu realized that people needed mercy and forgiveness from this God. Lao-tzu realized he needed a relationship with this God who he could not name. And for years in my life, the Tao Te Ching was a bedrock for me. It was a safe harbor for my soul in my relationship with God. And it's through the Tao Te Ching that God led me to Jesus Christ. It was through the process of beginning to understand a relationship with God through his created world, echoed in the Tao Te Ching, that I eventually found Jesus Christ and found Jesus Christ's real presence on the altar in the Eucharist. You see, God really didn't lead me away from the world religions and away from the Tao Te Ching to discover Jesus Christ. God led me through the Tao Te Ching and through all of the Eastern religions into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Now that might sound strange and crazy to you, but that's my story. God didn't lead me away from other world religions. He led me through what I experienced in reading the texts of the other world religions into a relationship with Jesus Christ. If you don't think such a thing is possible, I invite you to hear the rest of my story. But it's safe to say that God used the Eastern religion of Taoism to lead me, Dan Tarrant, to Jesus Christ.